gotcha. I've got to stop dodging bullets at my age, but someone has got to clean up these crooks. I think I'll go back to painting. G'day, I'm Robert Hagan, the artist from down under who'll go anywhere and do just about anything to get a good painting. This time I'm in the United States of America, and this episode of A Splash of Colour is about something that weighs in at a massive 1,400 pound. It's got a giant set of horns, can run like the wind, and will scare the living daylights out of anything that gets near it. And it was smack bang in the middle of the Wild West. Now, I'll bet you don't know what it was.
A splash of colour in the air, nature's palette everywhere. All this beauty we can share in our world. Catch the moment in your hand, from every corner of this land. Breathe it in and understand in colour. We travel far, we travel wide. Desert, ocean, mountainside. Cover up the grey outline with a splash of colour, yeah.
Well, here I am, deep in the heart of Texas, the Lone Star State, home to gunslingers, runaway stagecoaches and stampeding cattle. Well, at least that's how it appeared to me when I was a kid, spending my entire afternoon watching episodes of Gunsmoke, Bonanza and Rawhide. It's just about impossible to think of Texas without thinking of cowboys and cattle, and that's the reason I'm here. In fact, I'm mainly interested in the cattle, and not just any cattle. I've come here to find a special breed of cattle. It happens to have massive horns, about that wide. It's an essential part of the very history of Texas. Not only Texas, but the whole of America. And to me, at the core of all I found exciting in the Wild West movies. They call it, and rightly so, the Texas Longhorn. So my quest is, I want to find out what's happened to it. Where is it now? Texas Longhorns go so far back in American history, they can even be traced to Christopher Columbus. That's right, when Columbus came to the Americas with his second fleet in 1493, he brought 30 young Spanish cows and 3 young bulls with him. But the descendants of these Spanish cattle had to find a way to cope with the predators of the new country. And the main predators attacking the calves were the prairie wolves. That's why the cows started getting very choosy with the bulls they mated with. They picked the bulls with the longest horns. Eventually, the cattle had horns big enough to repel the wolves. They could scare off a mountain lion or a grizzly bear, and even the Native Americans treated them very warily. But if I'm going to find a really great Texas Longhorn, I'll need to take my painting gear further north. I'm heading for a place that's got so many cattle, it's known as Cowtown. But I reckon it's a lot better known by its real name, Fort Worth. Well, I found myself a nice little hideaway just on the edge of town, under the shade of a tree, bit of horsey stuff around me. These people in Fort Worth really do look after their history. It's very, very impressive. Now, this is my 4th day. I've got one more day to go, and I'll bet you're wondering what it is he's painting. Well, if you've seen my other shows, you'll know that I never give that away till the end. It will be a surprise to you and a few others. But what actually happened to the Longhorn? The Longhorn thrived, particularly in Texas here, with its climate so similar to Spain, so that by the mid-19th century, millions of Longhorn roamed the flatlands, arid lands and wetlands of the southern states. And that, folks, set the stage for the whole Wild West imagery, legends and myths that eventually led to the iconic status of the Cowboy. Hollywood had a field day. But how is the Longhorn connected to all of this? After the Civil War in the mid-1860s, South Texas was swarming with more than 5 million Longhorn. They thrived with the mild climate and few predators. A couple of hundred years of running wild made these now Longhorn cattle also tough and hardy. And they could run so fast, a cowboy's pony had to go flat out to catch it. Immigrants flooding the northern cities pushed the demand for beef sky high. Sirloin steaks were selling for 40 cents a pound in New York City. Smart ranchers and unemployed returning soldiers quickly saw there was a good little profit from buying a $5 Longhorn in Texas and selling it for 40 bucks up north. They couldn't pass that up, could they? All they had to do is go out and round them up. And that's exactly what they did. They pulled in whopping herds of between 40 to 50,000. Now all they had to do was get some ownership on them. And that meant cutting them out from the herd, roping them in and branding them. Sounds easy when you say it, but it's close to madness if you ask me. Now this is where the cowboy and horse part gets really serious. A Longhorn bull that gets stirred up can be a pretty scary character. These babies can weigh up to 1,400 pounds and they're pretty quick. Trying to get a rope around an angry Texas Longhorn must be like trying to lasso a Sherman tank at full speed and with a monstrous set of lethal horns on the front fenders. Then to chase one down and leap at full speed from the horse to its back, stop it, then flip it over is equally as insane. But this is what they did. Imagine how many broken cowboy bones there would be with a herd of 40,000. Just about all these cowboys were young men, some returning soldiers from the Civil War, some outlaws running from the law, and some sons of wealthy Easterners chasing adventure. Colour and creed didn't matter. A cowboy willing to work was a cowboy wanted. Part of the legend of the cowboy being a tough dude came from this work. So with them herded up, they needed to get them north to sell them, and this was the drive. The best known of the drive trails was the Chisholm Trail, blazed by the legendary Jesse Chisholm in 1864. In his heyday, it ran all the way from the Rio Grande River to central Kansas. Unlike the movie version, life on the trail was often dull and monotonous. 18-hour days for less than $1 a day was the going rate. Moving 2,500 Longhorns 1,200 miles from Fort Worth north to Abilene took 3 months, and done with just a handful of men. Drive them faster and they would lose too much weight. The wranglers at the front of the herd had the best job, while the guys at the flank or at the back had the dust and the smell to ride through. Try breathing in dust for 18 hours and see how you feel. Not too good, I reckon. Good grub and high spirits meant a good chance of success. I remember swinging a sledgehammer about 12 hours a day in blistering heat of 120 degrees on a railway gang in outback Australia. when I was about 20, with just passable grub, so I have a good idea what all this means. It was tough then, but I reckon the Cowboys had it tougher. For 25 years, millions of Longhorns were rounded up from the coastal prairies and brushlands of southern Texas and driven north over a network of thousands of miles of trails to the markets in Kansas and Colorado. Many of the legends and myths of the Cowboys sprang from the stories surrounding the hardship, danger, companionship and lifestyles of the men on these drives. The notion generated by Hollywood, where the main characters spent more time drinking and shooting a six-shooter than herding cattle, wrestling steer and breathing in dust, is very fanciful indeed. It was the opposite, folks. With a sore rump from being in the saddle all day, men then had to take turns watching the herd at night and hope that a wolf's howl or unexpected movement or sharp sound didn't spook the flighty, highly strung longhorn. Nighttime was the only time they could do a bit of dreaming and reflect on what might be. Cowboy songs and prose came from the lonely hours spent on night watch. Then there was the unpredictable weather. Some storms dropped rain and hail, wind and cold. Getting a good night's sleep wasn't easy.
There was almost continuous rain, snow, and sleet all the way up the trail. It was really tough sleeping on the ground. It was so wet and cold. By morning, I didn't have a stitch of dry clothing on me. We would move the fire over and plop down on the ground, which would stay warm for a while.
Said H.P. Cook, a working cowboy at the age of 10. Days when the temperature got past the 100-degree mark were dangerous. It meant thirst and dehydration. The smell of water to a weak and parched cow or horse will trigger them to stampede to the rivers. Many jumped headlong to their deaths. Water was the cowboy's friend on most occasions, except though when it meant a river to cross. Wranglers and cattle often drowned from fast currents or were sucked to their deaths in quicksand. The Red River on the Chisholm Trail is one notoriously treacherous to cross. Tens of thousands of Longhorns, under pressure of time, waiting to cross at multiple locations, a sometimes swirling river with shifting gutters and unstable mud banks was common and scary. Frequently, cattle were so jam-packed the cowboys could literally walk across their backs. But drinking the often salty water was no good. It made them sick. It definitely wasn't as easy and as romantic as Hollywood made it to be. But sometimes the trail bosses got lucky and got unexpected help. See, Longhorns are herd animals and they'll follow a leader. Charlie Goodnight, who blazed open the Goodnight Trail, had one such prize steer called Old Blue. Now, he had a great big set of horns, a radar-like sense of direction, and he got a lot of respect from the other Longhorns. He was like a Pied Piper. The blue bell that hung around his neck went ding-dong, and all the other Longhorns followed that sound. In all, he led over 10,000 cattle over 8 drives. And the funny thing about Old Blue was he preferred to hang out with the cowboys rather than his own Longhorn mates. So he was seriously good health. But apart from the chance of being bitten by a rattlesnake or a scorpion, or breaking the horse's leg in a prairie dog hole, there was another bigger problem. And all hell broke loose when this happened. A bolt of lightning and a clap of thunder. Wolves howling on the top of the hill. The lurch of a horse quickly caused panic and set the Longhorns into a wild stampede. Cattle running with fear and in a frenzy are mad, and to try and head them off, just as mad. Idle Longhorns attracted the rustlers, especially under the cloak of darkness. Trail bosses kicked butt big time for guys sleeping on point duty. Then just as they get into Kansas, they're met by the fickle and edgy Indians. Settlers had mass slaughtered the buffalo herds and left the Native Americans, particularly the most aggressive of them all, the Comancheros, hungry, angry and dangerous. The trail boss would try to give away the scrawniest Longhorn to calm them down and to get the okay to pass. Trail bosses had to be tough and hard. Young men under stress of hard work, responsibility, eating dicey food and constant loneliness meant bosses had to be forceful and resilient to keep a lid on things. Fights broke out with fists rather than guns and bullets. So a Longhorn cattle drive was anything but a walk in the park, but it played a big part in forging the cowboy character. And when he wasn't roping them and branding them, he was relaxing. Fort Worth, they say, is where the West begins. Originally founded as a military camp in 1849 to protect the settlers against the Indian attacks, it went from a sleepy outpost to a bustling town when it became a stop along the dusty Chisholm Trail. By the mid-1860s, it was the centre of the cattle drives. In its heyday, during the 1870s and 1880s, these stockyards covered more than a mile. There were more than 2,600 pens here, full of cattle that had been roped from the ravines and the plains and so forth around here. From here they went along the Chisholm Trail, which ran straight through downtown Fort Worth, ripped right through here north. 9 million head of cattle were driven along that trail. It was the largest movement of cattle known to mankind ever. Incredible when you think about it. That's 3 times the population of Sydney. Holy mackerel, this must have been a sight then. If I really listen hard, I think I can hear them still baying in the movement of hooves here and the crack of whips. When the rail line came to Fort Worth Stockyards in the 1870s, it boomed big time, going from Cowtown to Queen City of the Prairies. But it was the cowboys on leave between drives, whooping it up, that gave it its other name, the Paris of the Plains. Fort Worth was the place where the cowboys let their hair down. When the Sundance Kid wasn't robbing banks, he used to hide out down here. A fistful of dollars, a couple of weeks in civilization before another 1,200-mile drive on the Chisholm Trail. It was on for young and old. Cowboys were quickly separated from their money. All sorts of shady characters showed up here, trying to make a quick buck in this particular part of Cowtown called Hell's Half Acre. It had the biggest collection of bars, dance halls and bawdy houses south of Dodge City. In the old days, it was a dangerous denizen of desperate adventurers. There were thieves, gamblers, panhandlers, shysters, shady women, buffalo hunters, highway robbers and gangsters of every description. Shootings, knifings, muggings and brawls were a nightly event as cowboys mixed with this motley lot. As the importance of Fort Worth as a crossroads and Cowtown grew, so did Hell's Half Acre. All of them, one way or another, living off the flow of money pouring into Cowtown from the sale of Longhorn cattle. It started quick and it ended quick, but the legend was born. The end came. Barbed wire fences set property boundaries and ended free-range cattle grazing. Ranchers planted crops on the cattle drives. Railroads continued to build lines further west, shrinking the drives. Texas cattle had ticks, against which the new and fancy European cattle had no immunity. The thing is, the legend of the cowboy was born, and whichever way you look at it, he was inextricably linked to the Longhorn. By 1927, the majestic horns of the Texas Longhorn was heading to become just a fading, distant memory. The 20th century was passing them by. Now they were little more than a pest, and were heading towards extinction. And that almost happened. Well, that's sort of blown some dust off my memories of the Wild West. That was a pleasant reminder of the past era. And there was quite a good little crowd here. But somehow or other, it doesn't quite fit. In fact, it's far short of a good inspiration for a top painting. I've got to find more than this. Well, this bloke reckons the Marquess Arrow Ranch in a place called Ben Wheeler, the other side of Dallas, is where I must go, and he was adamant about that. Ron and Barbara Marquess at the Marquess Arrow Ranch. So that's where I headed. This painting's coming along nicely. See, sometimes it's a fight from start to finish. Other times it flows off the brush. And then about 4 times of the year, it's as if someone's guiding my hand. Now those are the really special paintings. Anyhow, I couldn't understand why it had to be Ron and Barbara's ranch and not someone else's. There had to be something special there, but what? I was about to find that out. Ron?
Ron Marquis.
Pleased to meet you, Ron. Listen, can I have a look at these Longhorns, mate?
Absolutely. You got $20?
Happy to give you that and more.
All right, let's go.
Now, this bloke loves his ranch, and he really loves his Longhorns. The pasture is lush and the fodder plentiful, but I really didn't expect to see such perfect specimens. Now I see what I've been wanting to see. Great, there they are. They look like walking paintings with all the different colours. It may not be a furious Wild West shoot-'em-up stampeding cattle scene, but I'll tell you what, there'll be a pretty good little painting out of this. At least I sure hope so. And then I spotted it, a beast with a giant set of horns. I said, what in the heck is that monster over there, Ron? 101, he said. 101? What's that mean, I asked. That's how far it is from tip to tip, Ron replied. Holy dooly, that's massive, I thought. Then he told me it held a record for the biggest stretch of horns in the world. Now he's got to be a contender for my painting. There are so many settings for me to choose from for the Longhorn. Remember, they survived in all sorts of conditions, but the one I favour is a lot of dust, some tussocky grass and a bit of rugged terrain thrown in. Anyhow, while I put those in, let me tell you what the other, totally unexpected reason was for me having to go to the Marquess Arrow Ranch. Not far away from the rest of the herd are 5 calves, all results of what Ron calls his scientific breeding program. Another name is cloning.
She's the longest horned cow in the world and she doesn't have any horns.
So now, what happened to the horns?
What the heck do we do with that? I'll explain later. See the young little brown cow behind
brown
it?
one. That's here.
That's her. That's the longest
now,
horned cow in the world.
You're guaranteed she will end up with the longest horns.
Yeah.
She will.
Yeah. Now, you want to know how I know that?
How?
Because there she is. That's her. There's 5 clones there from 5 different families, so there's 5 different animals there. And the host cow is just a host cow. We create an
host
embryo.
cow.
She
Yeah.
carries it for 9 months and gives birth to this. We start there and breed up. These animals here that we're showing you have got some age on them. Like this is a 14-year-old cow. 14 years ago, nobody knew she was going to be the longest horn cow in the world. We know that she is. So from the minute that she was made into an embryo and put into the uterus of the cow, we fed the cow to make the calf grow better. So that calf will be better than this cow, guaranteed. Believe it or
How
not,
much-
if you eat real good, you get bigger.
Don't talk to me about that.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
I've been in the bottom paddock for a bit too long.
But that's the story. That's that simple.
Yeah.
So if we want to start with the best cow in the world and breed her up, that's all we have to do.
Like Barbara said, you're living the American dream.
I am. Every day.
It makes you think this. I came here just to find the Texas Longhorn. What I've in fact learnt about this is far more than just the simple fact that they still exist. They are an old breed, and they are perhaps, because they are a genetic goldmine, the saviour for the cattle industry because of their unique characteristics, particularly two things. One, their ability to be able to reproduce easily. The second one is that they have a fertility spread of time which is far greater than the normal breed of cattle. They're very, very special. And I've been lucky to have this insight into really what goes on with these cattle. I thought this was going to be a walk in the park edition of A Splash of Colour, but it's turned out to be one full of surprises. To have 101 up there leading the herd, and then Ron Marquess as the trail boss, I think will please Ron and Barbara. And as much as I feel the Longhorn's been sort of left out of the history books, I'm pleased to find them, and I'm very thrilled to see them well cared for. I suppose it's because they can't talk tough, play the harmonica, shoot a 6-shooter, that they haven't been iconised as much as I believe they deserve. But one thing's for sure, if Columbus hadn't have left those 30 head and a couple of bulls, there would never have been a Wild West as we know it. Certainly not Roy Rogers and John Wayne. We've got to thank the old Longhorn. I'm going to sign this now. Hagan. And a couple of spots on 101 for my mum. Does this painting need a frame? It's a strong one. I'm happy with it as it is. No, it doesn't. I'm Robert Hagan. I hope you've enjoyed this edition of A Splash of Colour, and I'll see you next time. G'day.